Hey everyone, it's Amanda with My Life My Way, and welcome back to TTC Tuesdays. Today we're going to go back to the basics of fertility. So we're going to talk about male and female genitalia, we're going to talk about how they work, so how sperm production and ovulation function, and how they come together to fertilize an egg. So if we start out with the basic sort of female organs, it starts usually with the vagina, is kind of where we're going to go, and we'll work our way backwards, or work into the body. So vagina is just a muscular tube, and it leads from the vaginal opening up to your cervix. And your cervix is this nice sort of donut-shaped muscle, sort of sphincter actually, if you want to get technical, that goes between, it's sort of the meeting point between your vagina and your uterus. And it does open and close throughout different parts of your cycle, as well as when you're giving birth. The uterus itself is sort of shaped like an upside-down pear. It's got some nice thick muscular walls to it, and then the inside of the lining is kind of thin. That lining thickens every month in preparation for pregnancy, and then if conception does not occur, then that's the lining that we're going to shed every month. Fallopian tubes are actually kind of extensions of the top of your uterus on either side. You have a left and a right. They extend out off. They're about 4 inches in length in the average person, and they're about as wide as a piece of spaghetti. And there's the tube that your egg will travel from the ovaries into your uterus for implantation. The ovary itself is it's oval shaped. It's about 1.5 to 2 inches long, and it's sort of the major hormone producers for women. It produces estrogen, progesterone, that kind of stuff. So all of your feminine hormones, that's where they're coming from. Interesting point of fact, you're born with all of the eggs you'll ever have sitting inside of your ovaries in an immature state. And then in every month that you go through, in every cycle, your body will mature out one egg and then release one egg. That being said, there are months where you release 2 or 3, and that does occur. But generally speaking, you have one that matures and releases out. One of the interesting facts that a lot of people don't know is that the fallopian tubes in the ovaries are not actually connected. They sit kind of side by side, and the fallopian tubes have little like grabby villi that when an egg is released, they kind of attract the egg into the fallopian tube. So they're not actually attached, which is kind of neat. So there have been a few times where one fallopian tube is bad, and the other fallopian tube will actually grab an egg follicle an egg from the opposite ovary, which is kind of neat and a little bit random. It's very rare. It's not like it happens all the time or anything, but it's kind of an interesting fact. When we talk about male sex organs, starting out with your testes, the testes are the hormone producers for male hormones like your testosterone and that kind of stuff. They have 2 testicles, and they make and store sperm from the time they hit adolescence right up until death. So rather than being born with all of their sperm, they continually make them every day. They do have a duct system inside. It consists mostly of the epididymis, which is sort of a coiled tube that runs alongside of each testicle where the sperm cells are sort of stored and mature. And then they also have the vas deferens, which is another muscular tube. They also have one of them on either side. They're about 12 inches long, and it transports fluid containing sperm to the urethra. The penis, which is the fun bit that everybody knows about. The urethra actually runs through the penis, which is the tube that transports semen, and then the hole at the end of the penis allows the semen to leave the male body and enter the female body. They do have some accessory glands as well. They have seminal vesicles, a prostate, and Cowper's gland, which all provide different fluids that are going to assist the sperm in different ways, and we'll talk about those when we talk about sperm production a little bit more. Okay, so the basics of ovulation. So ovulation is the release of a mature egg from an ovary into the abdominal cavity. Usually one ovary will work each month, but there are obviously exceptions to that rule where sometimes they'll have both ovaries working at the same time, and fertility medications will definitely alter that balance just a little bit. The egg's going to move through the fallopian tube and eventually make its way to the uterus. Once it's been released from the ovary, so from the point of ovulation, that egg can be fertilized usually for about 12 to 24 hours. It's viable. So if you didn't manage to have sex right at the time of ovulation, it's actually not really a big deal. You still have 12 to 24 hours to get in there. The ovulation is actually regulated by your brain. So just like everything else, it's all in your head, which is super. Um, so the hypothalamus gland is going to send signals to your pituitary gland. The pituitary gland then releases out the follicle stimulating hormone, which is FSH, if you've heard of that being referred to before. But it's actually released from a point in your brain, so kind of just in between your eyes and then back between your ears. So it's actually quite deep inside of your brain. This follicle stimulating hormone is what triggers one of your eggs in your ovary to start maturing up. So the egg development takes place in a sac called a follicle. And if you've ever had a follicle scan during your fertility treatments, like days 10, 12, 14, somewhere in there, they might do a follicle scan to see how far along you've come. Those are what they're looking for. So they can't actually see the egg, but they do look for the follicle, which is why we have a follicle stimulating hormone. So it's stimulating that to become mature. As they mature, those follicles actually release estrogen, and then high levels of estrogen go back up to the brain, back up to the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, letting the brain know that the eggs are pretty much ready to rock and roll. At that point, that's when the pituitary gland starts making luteinizing hormone, or LH is what we call it. So that this LH surge causes the egg to finish its maturation process, and it actually releases the follicle, which is your ovulation. After the ovulation, that ruptured follicle is what's actually going to produce progesterone for you, as well as a little bit of estrogen. The progesterone is what actually causes the lining of the uterus to thicken up really nicely and prepare you for pregnancy. And then if fertilization does not occur, obviously, then the egg will just dissolve and the uterus is going to shed out that lining, which is our menstruation period, lovingly called Ant Flow or AF around fertility groups. The low levels of estrogen and progesterone during menstruation is actually what goes back to the brain, triggers the hypothalamus to start producing that follicle stimulating hormone all over again, and the cycle is going to repeat itself. For sperm production, sort of the other half of the equation and kind of an important part, the sperm actually need to be about 3 to 4 degrees colder than the rest of the body, which is why the testicles are on the outside of the body, so they're not body temperature. The scrotum that the testes are held in will actually thicken and come up to the body if it gets cold, and they'll actually loosen and relax from the body if they get too warm, and keeping that at that nice temperature. Which does kind of explain why when guys get sick or they're not feeling well, and they have a temperature increase, sometimes their sperm count actually gets affected by that, just because the sperm is so sensitive to how much temperature, what the temperature is when they're created. Cool fact, testes make about 100 to 300 million sperm every single day. That's nuts. That's pretty immense. But it's not an instantaneous process. It actually takes about 72 days to make and mature sperm up. So every day they're creating 100 to 300 million, and it's a 72-day process from start to finish, sort of like a factory. So the testicles make the sperm, and then they're passed to the epididymis, where they're stored for anywhere between 2 to 12 days. And this is basically where they learn to swim. This is sort of the last step in their maturation process. And then just before ejaculation, that Cowper's gland, which is just a small pea-sized gland, it's located near the prostate, releases a small amount of fluid that goes down into the urethra, and it actually neutralizes the acidity in there because the urethra passes both semen and urine through it. So this small amount of fluid from the Cowper's gland prevent any urine from being in there anymore, neutralizes that acid and makes sure it's kind of all cleaned out and ready to go when this ejaculation happens. During the ejaculation, both the seminal vesicle and the prostate gland are going to release fluid that mix with the sperm, and that's what actually creates the semen. It gives it this nice jelly-like consistency that actually prevents sperm from sort of falling back out, right? It's what prevents the premature leakage of the sperm back out of the vagina. But it will tend to melt and then leak out over the next few hours, which is super fun for us. The semen also has sugar in it, which is what gives the sperm the energy they're going to need, because this is a long journey they're about to take, and they're going to need it. Also, kind of a fun fact, sperm only account for about 5% of the overall semen. The other 95% are fluids from the seminal vessels and the prostate. Pretty cool stuff. That being said, there's still usually about 100 to 500 million sperm per ejaculation. You're always saying it takes one, but there's actually lots that get lost along the way. If the woman is not in a fertile time, sperm only live for a couple of hours after ejaculation. when the woman is fertile, our body actually changes to be more receptive to sperm, and they can live up to 5 days. So that's actually our body allowing them to live a little longer. It's kind of a neat little pit. For the actual fertilization, so sperm enters the vagina through intercourse and then swim up the female reproductive tract into the fallopian tubes. Keep in mind that most sperm never make it anywhere close to the egg, as they're going to die along the way. Once they reach the egg, it's got this layer of nutrient cells and a gel-like shell that are sitting around the egg. And the sperm actually need to penetrate this covering in order to fertilize. Hundreds of sperm may actually attempt it all at the same time, but only one egg is ever going to, or only one sperm is ever going to succeed in breaking into that egg. Once one sperm has made it into the inner circle of the egg, it actually changes its makeup, and it basically locks out all the other sperm. So it makes it kind of like a hard shell on the outside that the other sperm can't break into anymore. So it's only one sperm getting into that one egg, and then they just merge and they become a zygote at that point, which is pretty cool. So that's your fertilization process. After that, you have implantation, hopefully, which is the next big important step. As soon as the zygote is created, it's going to begin to divide as it moves through the fallopian tubes and down into the uterus. And within about 3 days, it becomes this cluster of about 12 to 32 specialized cells. It's called a morula, and it leaves the fallopian tubes and enters the uterus at that point. And then within about 4 to 5 days, it now is made up of hundreds of cells. And it's finally reached the inside of the uterus, and it now get called a blastocyst. And rather than a clump of cells, it's now a group of cells arranged around a fluid-filled cavity. So you get a little bit of what will become the baby, and then a wider area around it that'll also be cells. That's going to kind of become the sac that it's going to sit into, and there's a little bit of fluid that's already sitting inside the egg, and that's before it even implants into you. The enzymes on the blastocyst itself slowly start to dissolve the lining of the uterus where it touches, which allows the blastocyst to actually embed itself into the uterus. Happens usually about a week after fertilization, and by about day 12, the blastocyst is firmly implanted into the edge of the uterus there. Once the pregnancy is connected to the mother's bloodstream, the hormones produced by the pregnancy, called human chorionic gonadotropin, which is HCG, enters the mother's bloodstream, which is the hormone that we use when we're testing on home pregnancy tests. So usually about 2 weeks after ovulation, there's enough HCG in the mother's blood to start getting a positive on a pregnancy test. Although someone might see a little bit sooner, it's usually that 2 week mark that we're waiting for, and we lovingly call it the 2 week wait, which is the time between when you've ovulated and when you're waiting to see if you've got a positive pregnancy test coming in. I am going to tag a few things down here. The book that I was using was the Mayo Clinic Guide to Fertility and Conception, like I was showing you guys last week. It's been a fantastic book, and I also started reading Taking Charge of Your Fertility. Both of those went into the information that I was covering here. I just have notes. That's what I was looking at in my head, or in this video. The other thing I'm going to tag to this video is called The Great Sperm Race. I don't know if you've ever seen it before. I think it was this documentary made by, Discovery Channel. And it's actually really entertaining, and it's a really good look at how new people are created, and it goes all the way from how the egg is released and how sperm are created and that kind of stuff, and it kind of turns it into life size. So they take sperm and there are people running around in white costumes. They're kind of running towards it, and it puts it into something you can really relate to, and it's actually really entertaining. It takes about an hour to watch the whole thing, but it is really cool and very informative. And I've nerded out and definitely watched it more than once or twice in my lifetime. So anyways, I'll tag that to this video so you guys can check it out and watch it if you want to. And this is it for TTC Tuesdays for this week. If you have anything you'd like to have covered in future weeks, just drop a note, let me know, and make sure you like the video and subscribe so that you get further TTC Tuesday videos coming up on your feed. I'll talk to you guys later. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.